Shalom, I'm Rabbi Eric, and today I'll be reading from Judges chapter 3, 4, and 5. I'll be reading from the TLV Bible, but feel free to follow along on whichever version you have handy. Chapter 3. Now, these are the nations that Adonai left to test all Israel who had not experienced any of the wars of Canaan. It was only in order that the generations of Bnei Israel might learn from war, which they had not experienced before. These nations included the 5 Philistine lords and all the Canaanites, Zidonians, and the Hivites living in the hill country of Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon to the entrance of Hamath. They were for testing Israel to know whether they would obey the mitzvot of Adonai, which he had commanded their fathers by Moses' hand. But Bnei Israel settled among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and took their daughters for themselves as wives, gave their own daughters to their sons, and worshipped their gods. Bnei Israel did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, forgot Adonai their God, and worshipped the Baalim and the Asherahs. So Adonai's anger burned against Israel, and he sold them over into the hand of King Cushan Rishathaim of Amran Naharaim. And Bnei Israel served Cushan Rishathaim for 8 years. When Bnei Israel cried out to Adonai, Adonai raised up a deliverer for Bnei Israel to deliver them, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger kinsman. The Spirit of Adonai came upon him as he judged Israel. When he went out to war, Adonai gave King Cushan Rishathaim of Aram into his hand, so that he had the upper hand over Cushan Rishathaim. Then the land had peace 40 years. When Othniel, son of Kenaz, died, Bnei Israel again did what was evil in Adonai's eyes. So Adonai strengthened King Eglon of Moab against Israel, because they had done evil in Adonai's eyes. So he gathered to himself the people of Ammon and Amalek, then went and defeated Israel and took possession of the city of palms. Bnei Israel became subject to King Eglon of Moab for 18 years. But when Bnei Israel cried out to Adonai, Adonai raised up a deliverer for them, Ehud, son of Gera the Benjamite, a left-handed man. Now Bnei Israel sent tribute with him to King Eglon of Moab. Ehud made himself a double-edged sword, a cubit in length, which he girded on his right thigh under his cloak. Then he presented the tribute to King Eglon of Moab. Eglon was a very fat man. Now when Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he dismissed the people who had carried the tribute, but he himself turned back at the idols that were near Gilgal, and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. Keep silence, he replied, so all his attendants left him. Then Ehud approached him while he was sitting alone in a roof chamber, where it was cool, and said, I have a message from God for you. So he arose from his throne. Then Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. Even the handle went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not withdraw the sword out of his belly. And the filth came out. Then Ehud went out by the porch, shut the doors of the roof chamber on him, and locked them. After he had gone out, his courtiers came and looked, but behold, the doors of the roof chamber were locked. So they said, he is only relieving himself in the cool chamber. So they waited until they were embarrassed, but behold, he still did not open the doors of the roof chamber. So they took the key and opened them, and behold, their master was lying dead on the floor. But Ehud escaped while they were lingering, passed beyond the idols, and escaped to Sierra. When he arrived, he blew the shofar in the hill country of Ephraim. So Bnei Israel went down with him from the hill country, and he was in front of them. He said to them, Follow me, for Adonai has delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan opposite Moab, and allowed no one to cross over. Then they struck down at that time about 10,000 men of Moab, all stout men of valor, not a man escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel. Then the land had peace for 80 years. After him came Shamgar, the son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistine men with an ox goad. So he also delivered Israel. Chapter 4. But Bnei Israel did what was evil in Adonai's eyes after Ehud had died. So Adonai sold them over into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. His army commander was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. So Bnei Israel cried out to Adonai, for he had 900 iron chariots, and had harshly oppressed Bnei Israel for 20 years. Now Deborah, a woman who was a prophetess and wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at the time. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And Bnei Israel came up to her for judgment. Now she sent and summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, Hasn't Adonai, God of Israel, commanded, Go march to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali, and of the sons of Zebulun? Then at the Kishon torrent I will draw out to you Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will give him into your hand. But Barak said to her, If you are going with me, then I will go. But if you aren't going with me, I won't go. Surely I will go with you, she said. However, no honor will be yours on the way that you are about to go, for Adonai will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. So Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. Then Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali together to Kadesh, and 10,000 men marched up after him, and Deborah went with him. Now Heber, the Kenite, had separated himself from the Kenites, from the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tents as far as the oak in Zananim, which is near Kadesh. They told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera ordered all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, and all the troops that were with him, from Hashereth Hagoyim to Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, Arise, for this is the day in which Adonai will deliver Sisera into your hand. Has Adonai not gone out before you? So Barak came down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. Adonai threw Sisera and all his chariots and all his army into confusion before Barak with the edge of the sword. Then Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim. The whole army of Sisera fell by the sword. Not one was left. Meanwhile Sisera fled on foot to the tent of Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between King Jabin of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. So Yael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, don't be afraid. So he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a blanket. He said to her, Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. So she opened a skin of milk and made him drink some, and covered him. Then he said to her, Stand at the entrance of the tent, and if anyone comes and asks you, saying, Is there a man here? Then you will say, There is no one. Then Yael, Heber's wife, took a tent pin and got a hammer in her hand, approached him stealthily, and drove the pin into his temple until it pierced through into the ground. For he was exhausted and in deep sleep. So he died. Now behold, as Barak was pursuing Sisera, Yael came out to meet him and said to him, Come, I will show you the man whom you are seeking. So he entered with her, and behold, Sisera was lying dead, with a tent pin in his temple. So on that day God subdued King Jabin of Canaan before Bnei Israel. The hand of Bnei Israel pressed hard on King Jabin of Canaan until they cut off King Jabin of Canaan. Chapter 5. Then Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, when leaders take the lead in Israel, when people freely offer themselves, bless Adonai. Listen, O kings, give ear, O rulers. I to Adonai will sing. I will sing praise to Adonai, the God of Israel. Adonai, when you came out from Seir, when you marched from Edom's field, the earth trembled, the heavens also dropped. Yes, the clouds dropped water. The mountains quaked before Adonai. This Sinai at the presence of Adonai, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anoth, in the day of Yael, the highways were deserted. Travelers walked by crooked paths. Villages were deserted in Israel, deserted until I, Deborah, arose, a mother in Israel arose. They chose new gods. Then war was in the gates. No shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with Israel's rulers, who offer themselves freely among the people. Bless Adonai. Riders on white donkeys, sitting on saddle blankets, traveling on the road, sing. Louder than the sound of archers at the watering places. There let them rehearse the righteous acts of Adonai, the righteous deeds for his villages in Israel. Then the people of Adonai went down to the gates. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, lead away your captives, O son of Abinoam. Then a remnant of nobles came down. Adonai's people came down to me with the mighty ones. Those with root in Amalek are from Ephraim, following you. Benjamin, with your peoples, from Machir came down rulers, and from Zebulun wielding the marshal's staff. Issachar's chiefs were with Deborah. Issachar was with Barak. Into the valley they rushed at his heels. Among the divisions of Reuben, there were great resolves of heart. Why did you stay in the sheepfolds to hear the piping for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben, there was much searching of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why did he stay by the ships? Asher sat at the seacoasts, dwelling by its docks. Zebulun is a people who jeopardize their lives to death, and Naphtali also on the heights of the battlefield. The kings came, they fought. Then the kings of Canaan fought at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo, but they took no spoil of silver. From heaven the stars fought. In their courses they fought Sisera. The Kishon torrents swept them away. That ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. O my soul, march on with strength. Then the horses' hoofs beat from the dashing of his mighty steeds. Curse Meroz, said the angel of Adonai. Utterly curse its inhabitants. For they came not to the aid of Adonai, among the mighty. Blessed above women is Yael, the wife of Heber the Canaanite. Above women in the tent is she blessed. Water he asked, milk she gave him. In a lordly bowl she brought him butter. Her hand reached for the tent pin, her right hand to the workman's hammer. And with the hammer she struck Sisera. She smashed his head. Yes, she crushed and pierced his temple. At her feet he collapsed and fell. He lay between her feet. He bowed, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell, dead. Through the window Sisera's mother looked out, through the lattice, and lamented shrilly. Why does his chariot delay in coming? Why do the wheels of his chariot tarry? The wisest of her princesses answered her. Yes, she repeats the words to herself. Are they not dividing the spoils? Maidens for every warrior. To Sisera a spoil of dyed garments, a spoil of dyed garments of embroidery, double dyed garments of embroidery, for the necks of every spoiler. So let all your enemies perish, Adonai, but may those who love him be like the rising of the sun in its might. Then the land had peace for 40 years.